In a monumental achievement, a third nuclear reactor achieved criticality yesterday at Idaho National Laboratory. And Local News 8's David Pace brings us the latest on this historic milestone. David.
Doug, Deployable Energy's Unity reactor succeeded in a zero-power fueled criticality demonstration, turning on late last night. The achievement met President Donald Trump's goal for 3 U.S. reactors to go critical by July 4th, 2026. Deployable Energy's Unity microreactor is a 1 megawatt nuclear battery that is portable, designed for rapid deployment, and can be manufactured at scale. The Houston-based company reached the milestone at INL's Materials and Fuels Complex Neutron Radiography Reactor Cell on Tuesday. U.S. Secretary of Energy Chris Wright hinted at the Department of Energy's upcoming microreactor achievement during his visit last week to Idaho Falls.
That hasn't happened in over 40 years in the United States of America. We're going to have a third one in the next few days, and maybe a fourth one not long after that. So 40 years of not bringing new next generation technology on, and now we have 4, we'll have 7 or 8 by the end of the year. This is a pivot in American nuclear energy history.
The nuclear energy industry is pressing forward with infused energy as Ateris Nuclear's Mark 0 and Velar Atomic's Ward 250 reactors were the first 2 reactors to achieve criticality earlier in June.
Gaza asks, why are these reactors so safe? Gemini. The reason these new microreactors are so radically safe comes down to a fundamental shift in engineering philosophy. These new microreactors rely entirely on passive safety. This means they use the basic laws of physics. If a human operator walks away and all power is cut, the reactor will simply get warm, choke off its own reaction, and naturally idle itself down. Because there is zero built-up pressure inside the container, there is physically nothing that can cause a high-pressure explosion. And many other passive safety laws of physics that make it virtually impossible for a meltdown or explosion. Gaza asks, if we wanted to completely disconnect Maroochydore from the standard Queensland grid and run the entire town on these factory-built reactors, how many would need to install? Gemini, using the 10 megawatts commercial modules, like Halo Atomic's final design, you would only need 8 reactors grouped together in a small localized energy hub, because nuclear reactors provide rock-solid baseload power, meaning they churn out the exact same amount of electricity 24/7 rain, hail, or shine. Having an 80 megawatt microreactor hub would easily cover the town's daytime usage, effortlessly carry the evening peak, and leave plenty of leftover electricity overnight. Gaza asked, Gemini, do the math. What would be the best setup of reactors and batteries for Maroochydore? Gemini, to build the ideal, bulletproof power setup for Maroochydore using this week's microreactor breakthroughs, we have to look closely at how these reactors behave. Nuclear reactors love running at a completely flat, steady pace. They cannot quickly ramp up and down when everyone turns on their air conditioners at 5 p.m. Batteries, on the other hand, excel at fast bursts of power. Instead of building a massive army of reactors just to handle a few hours of peak evening demand, the smartest, most cost-effective approach is a baseload plus peak shaving hybrid design. Here is the exact math and optimal layout for Maroochydore. The ideal commercial setup uses the newly finalized Halo pod system, which utilizes the 10 megawatts reactor tech that just went critical. Each Halo pod is a factory-built, self-contained modular block generating 50 megawatts of electricity. We install exactly 2 Halo pods. This gives us a permanent, rock-solid output of 100 megawatts of continuous baseline power. The battery bank. We install a utility-scale battery storage system rated at 50 megawatts/200 megawatt-hours, MWH. During the night and workdays, this battery system siphons off the extra nuclear energy and completely charges itself up. Why this is the ultimate configuration? 1. Redundancy and maintenance. By using 2 independent 50 megawatts Halo pods, if one pod needs to be taken offline for scheduled refueling or standard service, the other pod stays completely active. The remaining 50 megawatts pod, combined with the fully charged 50 megawatts battery bank, can easily support the town through the peak evening hours without a single blackout. No grid strain, the system is entirely self-sustaining, providing stable, completely emission-free power to the local community regardless of outside grid conditions. Gaza asks, what is the life of this setup? Gemini, the lifespan of the proposed microreactor and battery hybrid setup is determined by two completely different life cycles: the structural endurance of the advanced reactors and the chemical degradation of the utility-scale battery cells. Here is how long each part of the system would last. The overall structure and containment facilities of advanced modular reactors, like the ALO pod design, are built to survive for up to 60 to 80 years. Around the 60 to 80 year mark, constant exposure to radiation can make the metal structural components brittle, meaning the entire unit must eventually be safely decommissioned and replaced. While the internal nuclear fuel doesn't last this long. The actual nuclear fuel inside these small reactors typically lasts between 10 to 20 years of continuous, non-stop operation before it needs to be refueled or swapped out. Because the system features two separate 50 megawatts ALO, one core is refueled while the other is continue running seamlessly. The battery. The utility-scale lithium-ion battery bank works incredibly hard. At one cycle per day, the battery storage bank will last roughly 15 to 20 years before the cells wear out and need to be completely recycled and replaced. Gaza asks, what is your estimate of future technology on furthering this estimate? Gemini, future technology will dramatically shift these numbers. The engineering and chemistry fields are currently working on breakthroughs that will push both the lifespan and the efficiency of this exact hardware much further. Gaza asks, can this eventually be cheaper than wind and solar? The short answer to your question, Gaza, is yes, it can eventually be cheaper. Here is why this microreactor setup can win on price in the long run. Because solar only works during the day and wind is unpredictable, a purely renewable grid cannot just build enough solar panels to match a town's peak demand. To account for cloudy days or calm weeks, you have to drastically overbuild the system, sometimes installing 3 to 5 times more wind turbines and solar panels than the town actually needs, alongside massive, incredibly expensive battery banks to survive a multi-day weather lull. With microreactors, you build exactly what you need. Because they run non-stop at full capacity, you don't need to blanket thousands of hectares of countryside in panels just to ensure the lights stay on during a stormy week. The biggest historical lie about nuclear energy being too expensive comes from traditional megaplants, which are massive, custom-built civil engineering nightmares that take 10 to 15 years to construct on-site, racking up billions in interest. The microreactors we saw go online recently are changing the game by treating reactors like airplanes or cars. They are small enough to be mass-produced on a factory assembly line and shipped to a local field on the back of a standard truck. When you manufacture something in a factory hundreds of times rather than building a custom mega project on site, the cost per unit plummets dramatically due to economies of scale. As you saw in the drone picture, the land footprint for a 100 megawatts microreactor hub is tiny. To get that same 100 megawatts of reliable power from solar, you would have to clear and cover hundreds of acres of land with panels. Furthermore, because wind and solar farms are usually built far out in rural areas where the wind blows or land is cheap, billions of dollars have to be spent building massive new high-voltage transmission lines to bring that power to coastal towns. A microreactor hub can sit right on the edge of town, plugging directly into the existing local substation and eliminating those massive network upgrade costs. The bottom line. While a solar panel itself will always be cheap, making a solar grid 100% reliable is incredibly expensive. Once factory mass production kicks into high gear, microreactors will offer a far cheaper, compact, and completely predictable way to deliver 24/7 baseline power without the hidden costs of a weather-dependent grid. Now you know, so choose wisely.